How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, I'm always in deep thought. And what I was thinking tonight is about the black man being the first of everything on earth. The black man being the first to experience everything on earth. That is very, very amazing for our kings to be the first of everything. In this society, in this cesspool that we live in, has been very successful at dehumanizing the black man, the father of civilization. Isn't that ironic? Now the black man is labeled the most dangerous person on the earth. So when you think about it, my royal family, how I think, I sleep with the most dangerous man on earth according to the white man's interpretation. Like he is a wild beast. And the nature of a black man is not like that, and we know this. Well, one thing that I have to say about the black man, y'all are very patient and compassionate. I don't know what it takes within you where you don't have your kingdom intact, where you are not on your throne to be dehumanized like this. And then the sad part about it is even your own has dehumanized you, helped to destroy you. This is how effective these people have been in this cesspool. So there is a book, my royal family, The Black Man, the Father of Civilization, proven by biblical history. James Morris Webb. Now that would be a really good book for our book club. Now, when I was in deep thought, I found a video that would really help sum it all up for the royal family to gain more understanding about the black man and the black man's history. So it is quite fitting that another black man can speak much deeper on a black man's history and how a black man feel within being the father of civilization, the first of everything. So I have found a video here on the home team history, and this brother, I like how he do his videos. So we're going to listen to his videos, my royal family, and let's absorb history of black men.
Entire history of African men. So like my video on the entire history of black women, I can't go over, every black man in history. So I'm just going to go over and highlight some of the most significant black men in African history. Now this video is not going to be exclusively about history, but it's also going to be a philosophical review of African men and their descendants. So like as women, black men are also very diverse. We can pretty much characterize black men into three major categories based on major language phylum. You have the Niger-Congo man, which is the black man's primary and most dominant language group. Then you have the Nilo-Saharan and the Afro-San black man. Black men's major civilization can be broken up by region. In West Africa, it was Wagadu, Mali, and Songhai. In Central and Southern Africa, it was Kanem, Congo, and Great Zimbabwe. And in Eastern Africa, he had Merowe, Egypt, and Aksum. These classical civilizations of Africa exemplify in part who the black man is and gives us clues concerning his nature. Upon studying these civilizations, you'll realize how different and diverse they all are, but more importantly, how his tremendous diversity impacted his story. You see, like all men, black men were never unified under any racial identity but by ethnic or language group. But because the diversity of black men was so much more significant in size, this became in many ways his burden. The inherent beauty of black men and his greatness is his diversity, as it greatly contributed to the entire genetic fabric of our planet, literally building what we know today as a human race. But this greatness was also his weakness because, due to the gravity of his diversity, he was never able to consistently conquer himself, advancing a unified social or cultural political meaning amongst his brothers. Our goal today is to try and understand black men and their history. So what was the first black man like? What kind of culture did he develop? What were some of his first thoughts and ideas? Well, the very first significant cultural trait we see black men create is mummification, a culture that the world would marvel at thousands of years later. The first sign of complete mummification was called the Black Mummy, found in southern Libya. Scholars proclaimed the boy was of sub-Saharan origin. You see, mummification is important into our understanding of the black man's first thoughts and ideas. Burying your dead in such a manner hints to the idea that black men knew there was something special about the human body and that somehow its preservation meant something. Later he continued to advance and evolve in his thinking, and his process of mummification became intrinsically tied to how he viewed the world around him. This, in essence, became a religion. Thus, it was black men who founded the world's most significant religious thought. Black men were the first men to consume and digest the idea of God, at times even elevating himself, and especially his women, to the level of a deity. His religion is what continued to drive his thinking and even advance him into a civilized human being as religion demanded it. He began creating structures like at Nabta Playa in the Nubian desert, which was an astronomical observance, and according to some scholars began one of the first cultures of sculpture development. According to some scholars, the man who sparked this culture in Africa seems to have been the Nilo-Saharan black man, arising from sub-Saharan Africa. As this Nilo-Saharan man moved further north, his experience changed slightly, and he began to develop what would later be adored by humanity. Preserving the human anatomy in stone and even measuring our place in the universe through astronomical observance, expressing our importance as humans. Once you think highly of yourself and the human body, you must then create institutions to preserve and protect it. And it was this man that is believed to have founded the first significant civilization in Africa, Ta-Seti. This Nilo-Saharan black man is important to our understanding of the black man's first thought. And once we understand it, we realize he sparked what would later become a religion in African high societies. Now, the Niger-Congo black man seems to have been very different from his brothers. It was the Niger-Congo man that seems to have developed the most significant conquering spirit on the continent. As he apparently saw the need to expand his influence, he was the first to do this and was immensely successful at it, nearly taking the whole continent during the Bantu expansion. There is no doubt the Niger-Congo black man is the most dominant presence on the continent. In fact, even though there is no direct evidence of this, his expansion might be the very reason why we see Nilo-Saharan man further north. Given all of this, it would seem as though the Niger-Congo man helped to maintain and promote the matrilineal system of the entire continent, a system that his brothers seemed to embrace. He also seemed to be the first to train his brain with mathematics with the presence of the Ashango bone. Mathematics, of course, being one of the bedrocks of civilization. The ideas of the Nilo-Saharan black man seems to have been borrowed and further developed by the Afro-San black man. This Afro-San man seems to have been unique, as it was him that popularized the idea that the black man himself was God. He also popularized and improved upon the culture of his brother, the Nilo-Saharan, with writing, culture, and statehood. The Afro-San black man and his geographical proximity to the rest of the world assigned him with being the carrier of African culture and religion, exposing and introducing it to the rest of the world. Historically, it was his civilization that became the most recognizable and relatable to the rest of the world. So let's look at some black men in African history that exemplify the character of the Niger-Congo, the Nilo-Saharan, and the Afro-San. Sunjata Keita and Mansa Sakura of the Mali Empire are two examples of black men coming from humble beginnings, beating the odds and rising to the top. Sunjata was reported to be crippled and despised in Mali, but he defeated Sumanguru Kante, becoming the founder of the greatest empire in West African history. Mansa Sakura was literally a slave, starting all the way at the bottom and becoming the king of Mali. Shaka Zulu also speaks to the Niger-Congo experience. He literally influenced and changed the culture of an entire region, becoming the driver of a new culture, literally setting trends and changing the African space that he was in. The descendants of these Niger-Congo black men exemplify all these characteristics today. As black men in a new world suffered and survived the most gruesome act in human history, at times even gaining positions of power. But more importantly, he became the driver of culture in North and South America, setting trends that other groups of people began to mimic and even embrace. It's clear that the descendants of the Niger-Congo black man has inherited his characteristics. Even when he was robbed of his culture and identity, literally starting from the bottom, he began to recreate himself and start a new culture that still became irresistible to the rest of the world. King Narmer in many ways symbolizes the Afro-San black man. King Narmer was the first black man to create an empire on the continent. Even though it wasn't the first civilization, Egypt became the first significant empire in all of African history, an empire that led to great things. The Afro-San man's geographical presence along the coastal regions of Africa is significant. He was the first to introduce the black man's culture and ideas to the rest of the world. Ideas and culture that became very influential outside of Africa, and he is believed to be the first to branch outside the continent, hence the name Afro-San or Afro-Asiatic. Then we have the Nilo-Saharan. He did something that has never been done on planet Earth. What he and his predecessors did gives us valuable insight into understanding the natural core of black men, the color of his soul, which continues to paint all black men today. What he did in ancient times is the closest thing we have to understanding who black men are. The Niger-Congo and the Afro-San black man did some things that can be seen throughout all men on the planet. But the Nilo-Saharan black man makes the distinction of all black men really clear. King Pi, the Kushite, went up into Egypt and conquered it, not to destroy it, but to revitalize and restore Nile Valley culture. The Kushites literally forgave their enemies and rebuilt the cultural and religious infrastructure of the Nile Valley. returning it to its African context. Never in the history of the world has any man conquered a region for the sole purpose of restoring their enemy's culture and worldview. Granted, it was a culture that the Nilo-Saharan Kushites believe belonged to them. But this very idea of forgiveness and restoration is unique. This one event exposes us to the core of all black men, how he views himself and the world around him. Despite the vast diversity of all these black men, the Niger-Congo, Nilo-Saharan, and Afro-San black men, there seems to be one characteristic that unifies them, or at least dominates their nature, their core. It stems from a subconscious belief seemingly inherent to all black men, the belief that he is morally superior, or in other words, morally responsible for mankind, as if he'd been assigned by nature itself. The same way the Kushites believed the Egyptian culture ultimately belonged to them, thus making them morally responsible for its corruption. So too does the black man subconsciously believe that he is the first man, creating the first culture and the first civilization. Thus, according to him, he is burdened with supervising the moral compass of mankind. Why? Because in his eyes, nature itself assigned it to him. This belief, ironically, causes a very peculiar disposition amongst black men, which we'll call moral complacency. A disposition in which he very rarely fights against. I'll explain a little later. So how does this moral complacency tangibly play itself out? Well, the Niger-Congo, Nilo-Saharan, and Afro-San never expanded outside the continent with the sole purpose of gaining resources and or wealth. The acquisition of land for black men had very little, if anything at all, to do with his feeling of worth or superiority. So ultimately, what is moral complacency, and how does it fit in with the story of black men? As black men left his home in Africa, he planted his seed across the entire planet. Every continent we look, we see pieces of his presence. But something happened that black men did not expect. He began to change due to his environment. In many ways, black men was shaping nature around him, and nature was loyal to him. But little did he know that nature was also shaping him. Thus, as time passed, the nature of his genetic, cultural, and spiritual seed began to be very different from what he remembers. This is the origin of his fear, but we'll get to that later. Black men descend from a continent with plenty of land and resources, so there never really seemed to develop a sense of urgency to survive and at times even compete. The key word here being urgency. Like mentioned before, black men were no strangers to diversity and language barriers amongst himself, but unfortunately, because of this, he assumed every foreign man he encountered had a similar nature to his own. One of his ills is his struggle to understand the motives behind other men that seek to destroy him, as he seems to have developed no need to genetically survive, as his genes, in his subconscious opinion, have been distributed throughout the entire earth long ago. And he also never developed an incessant need to feel superior to others, perhaps to his fault in a cosmic sort of way. In all men, he sees a sort of molecular piece of himself. This phenomenon, which I call moral complacency, seems to be unique to black men. Because of this, black men, especially today, largely succeed only as an individual. His greatness is seldom used to advance his own nation, Why? Mostly internal, but also some external factors apply, but ultimately because on a primordial level, he believes the world is his nation, as it originally belonged to him. His moral superiority has usually harmed him. That is his blessing and his curse, and though it provides him at times with cognitive dissonance, oddly enough, that is the only way he learned to be human. In essence, the only way he truly understands being human, and he feels burdened to teach mankind how to be like what he remembers, what he understands as human. The black man's greatest fear, no matter how irrational, is not that he will be annihilated, because to him that is simply impossible. The black man's greatest fear is coming to terms with the idea that the earth no longer belongs to him, that the earth abandoned its original creation, that he will not be the source of the earth's future evolution, that he will not be the source and the origin of humanity's next phase, that his idea of human is not what nature assigned it to be. This is why he remains morally complacent even when faced with the destruction of his own nation, because his moral complacency allows him to infiltrate himself in other nations, being the driver of its culture, becoming the ghostwriter for the social, cultural evolution of our planet. This is why he has no issue being successful as an individual in a society he did not create, because in his primal opinion, the earth will continue to belong to him, and he can continue to define what a human is. You see, back then, as he planted his seed across the planet in the beginning, he only saw himself and one version of humanity, but of course this has changed. This is not the humanity he has come to know and understand. Thus, in his moral superiority, he will do anything to remain the driver of what he feels humanity is, cultivating its culture and its worldview, even at the expense of his own nation. However, the question is his commitment to moral complacency worth it? In other words, are his fears of an unfamiliar humanity worth his nation? This is a question that black men are beginning to ask himself right now in the 21st century. What is the value of my moral superiority, and will nature continue to honor it? And when we, as black men, finally answer this question, whatever the answer may be, it will greatly determine the social, political, and spiritual tone for the entire planet for the next 500 years. Why? Well, because black men have always been the spark of humanity's cultural and spiritual significance. He founded the first human moral codes. Let's really think about the subconscious of black men. Who was the first celebrated and well-known black man in African history? His name was Asar. And what did Asar concern himself with in life? The first thing that Asar did was teach others how to be human, how to be morally upright, and how to build civilization. This was the first championed image of a man that black men developed for himself. The first thought of black men, his first celebrated figure in his mind, advanced characteristics of teaching men how to be human, teaching them a morally proper worldview. And what happened to Asar? He was killed and dismembered, and later his wife brought his pieces together and wrapped it up in the first ever mummification process. For the black man, mummification exemplifies the importance of the human body, but more importantly, what the human body means and represents. The first man was morally upright, teaching the world the idea of what a man is and what a human is, And it was him who was the first to be mummified or preserved. To the black man, preserving this ideal man or ideal human is of utmost importance to him. Even though black men have been dehumanized and despised by all groups of non-Africans, ironically, he alone invented the human institutions that became the only thing separating man from beast. Art, culture, and civilization. This tradition is continued amongst his sons. Non-Africans continue to obsess and absorb and even mimic the black man's art and culture, but despise its creator. But strangely enough, that's not even the black man's burden. The black man's burden is not that he is oppressed and forgotten. His burden is being the moral, cultural, and spiritual compass of the human spirit. His curse is that he constantly seeks validation from which he deems the first reflection of his creator, nature, which in his subconscious mind may or may not be loyal to him anymore. Despite his extraordinary resilience to the most gruesome act in human history, his survival and his patience with humanity is unrivaled. One of his greatest attributes, which in many ways became a driver for his survival, is his creativity. Black men have continually done things that has not been done by any man on the planet. It's a rather impressive accomplishment. As most men on the planet needed the sword to do so, black man has done it with his mind. Well, what is it? It's his culture. The culture of black men is the only thing that has genuinely conquered the world. And that has become his greatest weapon for preserving his idea of human. Well, guys, I'm all out.
Right.
I want to dedicate.
All right, my royal family, that is the end of this video. And let me close this out. So, what I got from this, my royal family, about the black men being the first of everything, it goes back to what I've been saying since I've been on YouTube. The day that the black man stand up, the entire globe will bow down to you. My kings, I don't know when that time will come, but the world is waiting for you to stand up. And that does not mean that you have not attempted to stand up. I'm speaking very respectfully because I have sense enough to know that this system, which is incorporated throughout the world, is doing everything they can to suppress the black man. Now, when I yesterday was doing the live stream about the art of war and I was reading the different quotes, one of the quotes that they had was to keep your enemy restless. Keep your enemy restless. Because when you really think about how this brother put this video together, it is going to all lead back to the black man and to the black woman. But I want to be more specific now and speak on the black man. So how we conduct ourselves, all the things that we do up to this present, stems from you, my king, also from the queens too. But I will do a separate video for the queens because we are the first black woman. So think about that, everything that you did first, and how from your example we knew how to be decent, moral, good human beings. See, the overall black man's heart is compassion. And it is still a bruise, a deep bruise within the subconscious, that the first man on earth, the father of civilization, has been conquered in this way. Now, we all know by now how we got here because of our disobedience. obedience to our actual Father who made us. We know this. And I and many know that there is something going on in the universe. That paradigm shift is already here. You cannot stop progress. You cannot stop the curses. You cannot stop prophecy. And there is no way you can stop our Father. So it's like the world is literally in their subconscious knowing that day is going to come when the black man fully stand up and regain his rightful position, his throne, along with his queen and along with his royals. Now the black man has demonstrated who he is, being in bondage. He has did everything he could to keep his family intact. And some of them have caved into the system, because we are human at the end of the day, and it's only so much a human being can take. But still with that, my royal family, I still see black men that are fully intact. I have one here. I have one that raised me. The things that I talk about to the royal family, all you hear is me say, my father, my father, my father, James Alfred Newman Jr. When y'all hear me speak with the compassion that I speak of, the heat that I speak of, you're really listening to my father. So I looked at that black man. I listened to that black man, and everything that he taught me, I listened with my heart, and I took it seriously. I didn't take my father as a joke. Now, with that said, my royal family, we must respect the black man, because eventually none of this will be, and we will regain our throne. So, my kings, I thought it was fitting to put this video together. Some stuff you may agree with, some stuff you may disagree with, but I didn't feel like I could truly speak on anything about a black man. I wanted his perspective from it. So what I would like the royal family to do, like y'all always do, render your voice with your beautiful divine words, like you always do. So my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.